I thank the gentleman for yielding. I understand why this might be confusing to my friends on the other side of the aisle. After all, they didn't bother to pass a budget last year. Our friends on the other side of the rotunda in the Senate didn't bother to pass a budget this year. We have a budget crisis. We've got a $1.5 trillion deficit. We've got a debt that is getting out of our control. And what do you do when you have a problem like that? You pass a budget. The reason we're doing what we are doing today is because our partners on the other side of the rotunda in the Senate didn't pass a budget. House Republicans did. We passed a budget, and we're acknowledging and living within that budget. If our friends on the other side of the aisle bothered to pass a budget, we wouldn't be in the situation where we are today. Now let's discuss about what our budget does and what it does not do. Number one, because we have a debt crisis, we think we have a moral obligation to our constituents, our children and our grandchildren, to put our budget on a path to balance and to pay off our national debt. We also think we need to put our economy on a path to prosperity so we can get job creation. Let's, for a moment, talk about Medicare. Medicare, as we know it, is already gone. Our friends on the other side of the aisle, when they passed the Affordable Care Act, they stopped the Medicare status quo. Under the president's new health care law, that ends Medicare as we know it. It does two things. It raids Medicare and it rations Medicare. It takes $500 billion from Medicare to spend on the president's new health care law. Doesn't take that money to extend its solvency. Just like people have complained for years, we're raiding the Social Security Trust Fund, and we should stop doing that. The president's health care law does that to Medicare now. Second thing it does, starting next year, the president will appoint 15 unelectable, unaccountable bureaucrats to put in charge of Medicare, to price control and to ration Medicare for current seniors. What's worse is the president and the Senate still have yet to put out a plan to save Medicare, to prevent it from going bankrupt. We stop the rate of Medicare in our budget and make sure that $500 billion stays with Medicare to advance its solvency. I will not yield. Number two, we repeal the Rationing Board so that we don't put bureaucrats in charge of determining what kind of health care benefits seniors do or do not get. And number three, we save Medicare. And the way in which we do this is this. We say that if you're on Medicare, if you're 10 years away from retiring, 55 and above, government already made a promise to you. We want government to keep that promise. And so under our budget, we keep that promise. We stop the raid, we repeal the Rationing Board, and for those of us who are 54 and below, who have a bankrupt system that we right now cannot count on, we reform it so that it works like the system members of Congress and federal employees have. It's a system that looks like Medicare Advantage or the drug benefit works today, where seniors get a choice of plans offered to them by Medicare, guaranteed coverage options from which they can choose, and Medicare subsidizes that plan. It doesn't subsidize people as much if they're wealthy, and it subsidizes them a lot more if they're low income, if they're sick. This saves Medicare. This puts Medicare on a path to solvency. And more importantly, by saving it for future generations, we can keep the promise to the current generation. We repeal the Rationing Board, we stop the raid, and we save the program. That's what our budget proposes to do. But with respect to this rule, we're talking about discretionary spending. We're talking about paying the bills this year for all those different government agencies. We simply think Congress should function the way the founders envisioned it, where we actually pass budgets, we actually scrutinize spending, and we actually finance government's functions and its agencies. We're not ducking our responsibility, we're passing our budgets. And because we're deeming those numbers in this year's bill, it is simply because of the fact that nobody else around here seems to be bothered with passing budgets. The president hasn't put out a plan to fix the problem, and the Senate has for a second year in a row, failed to even pass a budget. We're leading, we're saving Medicare, we're getting the debt under control, and we're working to create jobs in this economy, and we're governing by actually paying the bills and passing our appropriation bills. And with that, I yield.